Welcome back to another episode of Nydal. I wanted to sort of take this opportunity at the beginning of the episode to show you some cinematics of some of the things that you may have missed if you've been avoiding my super long recorded live streams. Just so you know, I've been trying to make live edits as I've been streaming. So the last couple of streams that I've been uploading are just under the 1 hour mark. That's kind of my benchmark that I try to aim for. Just for the most part, cutting the pieces where I actually do work, as opposed to just talking with chat and things like that. So if you haven't watched one of these like new slightly edited live streams, maybe that's a much more engaging format than the multi-hour long ones that I've been posting just a couple weeks ago. I hope to, continue to record these sets of videos. Unfortunately, they take a significant amount of time, which I don't have at the moment. So hopefully I'll try to like find a mix between, live streams and these probably regular 20-30 minute episodes. And I don't know. Honestly, my main goal is to keep progress moving forward. And by the way, we're gonna have a lot of stuff done in this episode. This whole island that you see on the middle of the screen it's gonna be complete, which is a huge relief, because I was hoping that to get this done like months ago, but it's finally all sort of coming together. And for the most part, we're going to be decorating the university campus, but also I sort of decided to expand on the neighborhoods around it. I've been doing a lot of work off camera, just so you know, when it comes to neighborhoods. Mostly I've been doing it off camera because it's like work that you've seen me do a million times. I don't think it's particularly interesting. And also, honestly, I can make progress significantly faster when I don't have to like necessarily entertain you with commentary. I can just like play a podcast for like a couple hours and just get a bunch of work done. And this is mostly done so that in the cinematics at the end you just see how like the city sort of comes together, as opposed to having chunks of like empty space. It's all sort of coming together. I'm always going to be trying to at least show you the work that I do off camera on cinematics. So hopefully you enjoy the first few clips. And speaking of cinematics, if I have the time, because I have to, at the time of this recording, I have like less than 48 hours to maybe put this video together, but I'm gonna try to do a clip with just cinematics only, like basically a tour of Nydal at the current stage right after this video. So it might be next week after this video comes out, or the week after, but like I'm gonna try to do it. If not, I'll do it early 2020, which is we're at the very end of 2019 at the time of this recording. If you're watching this playlist way in the future, well, yeah, I guess this is irrelevant, but that's at least my plans for the moment, those. And actually, I was curious, please let me know down below in the comments if you're just if you've been like binge watching this series, like, and you're like, this is like the last episode you actually would just watch. And if that's the case, by the way, you should subscribe. That way, you get notified next time I post one of these videos. But and while you're at it, you might as well just follow me on Twitch as well. Anyways, enough with the shameless self-promotion there. So let me walk you through what I'm trying to do here. So this building, it's a Rico building, the main one, the one that's on like the ground level, I guess. And I think the name is like Data Mining Agency. And I had this building sitting there as a, kind of like stage for many months. I just plopped it there and that never really even connected. I don't think it was operational or anything. But I figured, usually around universities, there's like companies that try to attract the talent of like people coming out of the university. So I figured this will be, a very accurate representation. It could have been like any other generic office, but I figured in the sake of just coming up with a backstory for certain parts of Nydal, this was kind of fitting. So I don't know, I'm assuming the university is some kind of tech-related university. I'm sure that the usually universities have like all kinds of different, curriculum. But in this case, I guess maybe it's like slightly more focused to tech or STEAM careers. So I don't know. Let's just go with that. In order to keep things safe, usually a perimeter fence is kind of required. Mostly I just do it so the edges of the property, I don't know, just outlining things usually makes them look more realistic. So that's what I'm going for, especially because this particular building, I didn't want to like cover it with like trees and bushes all around. I wanted to have some spaces of just open grass, especially at the front of the building. When it comes to like the coastline that's behind this building, well, that's a different story. I'll talk to you about that in just a second once we get to it. But for the most part, I'm just using these like network-based fences. In fact, this one is vanilla, actually, if I'm not mistaken. It came with Park Life, which, by the way, it's one of those DLCs that I do recommend. If you haven't gotten it yet, I think the assets that come with it are really, really good and are very versatile. You can literally use them for a lot of things. So something to keep in mind. Furthermore, this area right here, I wanted to transition it somehow into this residential area that actually was built on a live stream like many months ago. You probably remember that if you watched it, but just as a quick reminder, I wanted to sort of transition or have like a gradient in between. So one thing that I don't know, came up with this idea of having like a mini commercial area where it's mostly restaurants, obviously parking lots and restaurants, as is the case with most of these things in Nydal. Starting with this seafood restaurant that also I think it's a vanilla asset that I've used extensively in other projects, but I think I've only used this once in Nydal. I think I included it in like when we built the marina, like in the like downtown area of the city. I think that's the only other place where I used it, but I don't know. It's a very generic looking asset, and I love those because you can just repurpose them to do whatever you want. Over here, just trying to address the height difference with the pluggable grasses, and I was talking about something else when this happened on camera, but when I was putting together that office complex just across the street, I've sort of combined a bunch of assets by the same author. That's usually a technique that I use. Like whenever an author has like a set of buildings, I try to like get a couple of them that look very similar, and because they usually have like a very similar aesthetic, they kind of work well together. So I just went ahead and plopped, I think like 3 of them, one stacked on top of one another. Again, this is going to be more obvious and the cinematics at the end of the video, but the point is that one of those buildings, because there was such a big height difference, I ended up just converting it to PO. I kind of talked about this in the previous episode regarding PO buildings. Basically, by converting these buildings to PO, and PO, it's procedural objects, which is that giant button that you see on the top right corner of the screen. It basically creates an instance of whatever asset or prop you have selected that you can edit. You can literally alter the nodes as if you're in a 3D editing piece of software. So you can go pretty crazy with it. I specifically try to use it a bit more, less insane-y, more on the normie side of things. Specifically to get rid of the fact that some of these buildings tend to push the ground, like lower the ground and make everything flat. So when you're stacking multiple buildings on top of one another on a hill, you end up with all kinds of crazy, weird glitches. And converting it to PO just removes all of that, so you can literally just do whatever you want. And it's it's a very, like I said before, versatile way of just creating a unique custom building by putting together a lot of them one into one another. Over here, like I was saying a second ago, I was just putting down a bunch of restaurants and coming up with some less sort of manicured parking spaces and signage. I'm guessing this is sort of the area where office workers would just come during their lunch to have lunch, and then this is sort of like the kind of area that's probably closed after hours. But Just wanted to make it look a little bit nicer because we're definitely in the suburbs now. So real estate may not be as expensive as it is and dense as it would be, otherwise would be in the downtown areas of Nydal. So because we do have a bit more space, you know, it's nice having some gardens and some flowers and things like that. And as you can see, I'm just going crazy with it. I'm also adding bollards in the areas around the roads. That way cars cannot potentially drive into the people sitting down there. And also adds a ton of detail, especially when you add the expansion joints that I love so much. I know I've mentioned this on like literally every episode and every stream, but honestly, just turning these chunks of like blank pavement or concrete in this case, you know, that texture, even though the map theme that I'm using, it has like a nice little tile texture, but it's whenever you have like a giant, you know, slate of empty tiles, it doesn't look super nice. So splitting them up in blocks using concrete expansion joints always makes it look amazing. At least that's what I think it all comes down to. And over here, just decided to put down a little roundabout. We used to have like a weird turn with like trees in the middle. It just didn't, yeah, it wasn't like amazing. So I ended up going for this one. And I think, did I ended up not using this and instead just, no, I guess I ended up keeping that one. Because when I put it down, the radius of the roundabout, it was a little bit too big, as you can see from the prop that's in the middle with the arrows. And for a moment I was considering maybe like reducing either the diameter of the roundabout or just straight up keeping it and filling it with trees or something, or flowers. I think I ended up just sticking to the concrete and having just the roundabout be in the middle and just have bollards all around for extra level of detail. This neighborhood that you see on the screen is adjacent to the office complex and the little commercial area, so I'm just expanding it, putting down a few houses. Nothing too crazy when it comes to detailing here, just wanted to have this road network extend a bit more closer to the water and trying to, you know, offset the different height angles so that we don't have huge amounts of cliffs. However, one technique that I've been trying a lot lately is just covering everything with trees. If you add enough trees together and, you know, the fat chubby bush that I also use a lot, it's a really easy way to get rid of all these like exposed rocks that may not necessarily be as realistic. I mean, having some of these rock exposed is not bad. Like I do rely on that aesthetic quite significantly throughout Nydal. But, you know, if you have like a perfectly super tall, like almost where the texture is like all stretched kind of cliff, it just doesn't look right. Like for example, that house over there looks too boxy, so I'm going with the brush tool and just making sure that everything's kind of smooth, even though it's kind of bumpy. But you know, that's what terrain looks like in real life. So just want to make it enough that it's somewhat plausible, and whenever it is not completely plausible and I don't have a lot of room to smoothen things out, I'm just going with these types of brushes, as you can see on the screen right now, just sort of covering all the imperfections. And while it doesn't look like super great when you're like in first person, I mean, it doesn't look bad either, but it may not look as detailed as other places. So I just add more, usually more bushes, especially the ones that are very dense and particularly small. Just put them alongside the road, so at least when you're sort of driving down, it looks more plausible. And beyond that, it's just trees on a hill that in some cases are kind of floating up in the air, or there's like literally tree roots in the middle of the rock. You wouldn't necessarily see that, especially not from the angles where I usually record my videos. Like for example, right here, there's a ton of trees that are kind of not plausible when it comes to why would they be planted where they are. But because there's so many of them and they kind of cover one another, it just everything works out. In fact, those fences that I'm putting down are not really connected inside. They're just covered by trees, and the trees kind of hide all these like missing connections. So I highly encourage you to try that technique if you're like unsure on how to sort of address these things. That's something that I found that works really well for me, and yeah, I'm sticking to it. Over here, this is something that's been requested for quite a bit, which is a lighthouse. And I'm using this vanilla lighthouse that I think last time I used this was in Sinu, so a long time ago. But because we have this like tiny peninsula at the very end here, I just thought it would be very fitting to not only put a lighthouse right in that spot, but also to surround it with rocks and also come up with some kind of perimeter fence so that people can just simply walk into the thing. I'm going with like a very not pretty industrial fence. I think it's like one of the vanilla ones. And as you can see, again, using the technique with the bushes and the trees to sort of hide where the fence would end. And I think that works super great. I had to bring that line of trees and bushes all the way to like the water. So that, I mean, again, this might be a bit more obvious in the cinematics at the end, but it all came down really, really nice. And I've never done that before, where the bushes almost get to the water, but it's kind of dumb for me to talk about things that are not even on camera. So let me tell you what I'm doing here. I'm just adding decals so that these things don't look super generic and monotone. I wanted to have like a hint of color. In fact, once we move into the university, which I think is like the clip after this one, or we're very close to moving into that, I ended up adding a lot of these tiles, not this particular design, just tiles in general, to give it a different color as opposed to the default pavement that we have literally everywhere. Sometimes just adding a few little decals like this just makes all the difference when it comes to how just a general area sort of looks and behaves. And here we go. We're moving into the campus. Wow, I realized that half of this episode was just me decorating the edges of the campus as opposed to the campus itself. But because I've already sort of started doing some detail work in the previous episode, this was a little easier. And as you can see here, we started with the with the tram stops. That is kind of like a pre-built kit that you can get from the workshop, and on top of that you get the individual pieces. So if you want to customize it or literally just make your own, you can do that. I don't have the name for it, unfortunately, but you can look it up. It's like very popular asset. So for the most part, because this building right here, it's already pretty decorated on its own, I just decided to add a few more just very tiny sets of details. For the most part, vegetation and having like additional paths, like I'm doing it here, for example. Trying to rely on that underlying grid that Surface Painter has to have like perfectly sharp straight lines, and together with the brush at the end, the concrete pavement brush or whatever it's called. It's like one of the oldest assets in the workshop. It fixes that issue where you get like the glitchy texture when you're basically doing Surface Painter next to a road. I think the big thing over here in this campus is me just adding a bunch of trees and vegetation pretty much throughout, mostly on the edges of this build, but I kind of went for like lower vegetation on like the main entrance or the areas where I wanted to highlight the architecture of the building. So specifically, for example, this top large building that you see there, you can see like the facade of the building is kind of open as opposed to be blocked by trees, and it's like mostly surrounded by flowers and like low level bushes. But you're gonna start seeing that I started put down like much larger vegetation on the areas around these buildings. I've also been converting some of these roads to this other one that has parking and a few planters sort of built in, so that I can go in and manually add more trees. This little pedestrian area, I'm trying to like rely on the fact that there's like a cut in the road so that it's a bit more accented. And might as well over here just add a few more details to the, well, this is technically outside of the perimeter of the university, but because it was probably all sort of developed at the same time, they kind of share the same road types and the same types of trees planted on the sides and things of that nature. Pun not necessarily intended. So when it comes to, let's see, what am I doing here? Oh yeah, just converting more of these roads. I tried a bunch of them to see which one would work best, but yeah, I'm still having that issue. You probably noticed that with the trams that spawn weirdly. Like for example, you get 2 cabs, one after the other, like that one, for example, there, or like it's missing the middle, what is it called? The accordion that's in the middle of the tram. There's a name for that. I forgot. I'm sure someone will tell me in the comments, but yeah, I don't know exactly what's up with that. I think there must be some kind of bug, because that was working fine. I didn't change anything. And yeah, the other tram lines use the same vehicles, and some of them work fine and some don't. So there's there's like definitely some inconsistency there. This is part of the low level vegetation decoration that I was saying a minute ago. Just especially because this is sort of like the main entrance of the university. This kind of ended up looking like the Monsters Inc. logo. So I guess I'm gonna get a copyright strike from this. Hopefully not, but yeah, we'll see. We'll see what happens. Just decided to keep the gardens really simple for the most part. Just wanted to use like one type of flower, which is the white flowers, and then the leafy bush. And as you can see here, I'm sticking to this tile theme to break apart the large patches of concrete, as is the case with this building in particular. And that just makes it look significantly better. I'm also using that technique of using the drains as the limit of the texture, which makes it look like I did it on purpose, as opposed to like, oh, I stopped. I didn't want to like go beyond this point, which in some cases it's what I ended up happening. But you know, I wanted to also add a few sets of props here and there, so that it's not just tile work and trees. And in this case, I wanted to keep this plaza a bit more concrete-ish, and as opposed to just fill it with more trees, because we have the tram stop on the other side and we have one of the buildings to the left of the screen right now. So I figure this will be a highly transited area for, you know, for the students. I think there's a library building right next to it. No, that's not a library building. I don't know what kind of building that is, but it's probably important. So my focus here was to have some paths connecting the different buildings and sort of all meeting at this central location. And I first, you know, attempted to do some tile work there, but the problem is because we have so many curves, it's really hard, and sometimes it doesn't even look good when you place down the like decals. Like you need to like put them on top of one another, and like decals are better suited for like more rectangular sort of shapes. In this case, because it's so organic and curvy, I ended up going with this I think it's like it's a network-based tile set. You can see like how the edges like sort of fit literally every nook and cranny, except for that nook and cranny at the top. Don't mind that, but I kind of owned it, and you know, just fill it with fences so that it looks a bit more integrated, and added some pedestrian crossings that are very clearly labeled, which is, I guess, probably a good sign. Like literally a good sign, because I'm placing signs all over the place, this is crazy. Like whenever I do that kind of detail, like I know no one will ever see that other than myself, or if you download the save game, which by the way, you can get from my Patreon page. Wink, wink. Eventually, by the way, the save game is going to be available for everyone for free in the workshop, but we're not a long ways away from that, just probably a couple months. But I do want to get this project done sooner rather than later. Anyways, I just went on a completely different tangent there. Point is, sometimes I just add those details and I think to myself, man, like nobody will ever see this, but you know, just brings me a little bit of joy doing it. So I guess that's why I do it. Finally, just adding a couple of benches here, sets of benches for the most part, trying to not clip them with the lamppost, even though this whole place is very not symmetric. I did my best to, you know, kind of align them and distribute them so they look slightly nicer. In general, I just added benches and trash cans pretty much throughout the entire campus, but at least these are the ones that I caught sort of on camera. And over here in the middle of this building, just adding more tiles as I was pretty much doing this whole episode. Really quickly, I want to point your attention to the hedge around the planters. Usually I've sort of noticed that after putting down the major buildings and you start, adding concrete on all these different gaps, you do end up with these natural planters that sort of get generated. It's literally just a patch of grass surrounded by concrete. And in many cases, I don't simply want to fill it with trees and fill it with bushes and things like that. So if you want to just stick to having a patch of grass, but you want that patch of grass to look a little bit nicer, surrounding it with like a little wall or a curve or a hedge just makes all the difference. I think it just adds like an extra contrast because of the shadow, and even when you zoom out, it just looks fantastic. So I highly encourage you to basically enclose every patch of grass that you have in your city. But here it is, the before and after. As you can see, a lot more work than what was captured on this video was done, and I'm pretty happy with it. If you enjoyed this episode as well, please consider giving this video a like and subscribe if you haven't already. But that's all I have for you today. Thank you so much for watching, and hope to see you in the next one.